Hi, my name is Damien Priestley. I'm a contemporary fine artist. My work typically looks at social injustice and cultural movements born of societal upheaval. Over the past four programs, I've been discussing my collections going back some 20 years, but today I'll be explaining my reasons for really making the series in the first place. I'm not conceited enough to imagine that art historians or art critics will be debating my work in the near future or indeed after my untimely demise. But on the slight chance that they are, then my intention is to remove any guesswork or conjecture by explaining it myself. Who better than the creator? The issue I have with the majority of art historians is their level of supposition, wild leaps in theories based on how an artist should be seen, making the story and the image more important than any logical progression, or dare I say it, the facts. If an archaeologist finds a small piece of flint or pottery or tesserae, they don't project a full amphitheater onto the site. There's a step-by-step forensic analysis based on the full picture of life and people at the time. Some art historians looking at artists and their work from the mid-1800s onwards make bold statements through the smallest of portals. When paintings were produced 200 to 600 years ago, they were at the orders of the church and the state, often intertwined. The paintings adorned palaces, stately homes, and churches. They were never meant for the masses. They were rarely seen outside of the circles of the top tier. With printing and books being only for the same folk, the result was that most people would never see the majority of paintings produced. Having said that, painting as an art form wasn't held on the same level as poetry. Schools were in place to teach painting and drawing. Poetry, however, was an altogether different and revered form of expression. So, bringing it up to the Victorian era, with the Industrial Revolution came the transfer of finance to a new breed. Capitalism was born. The world of finance changed from pure merchant trading to the investment stocks, shares, and dividends that we have today. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Carnegies, the Astors, the Gettys, and the rest appeared. This new breed were wealthy beyond what had previously been seen in any private hands. They sought to emulate their aristocratic predecessors by showing off their lavish lifestyles and money by commissioning and collecting art. This, of course, changed the life of the artists themselves. They were no longer obliged or at the behest to paint religious allegories and propaganda of the past. They were free to paint whatever drove them or inspired them because they knew there was a new market for their works, the wealthy investor. And here is where the divergence occurs. With this art freedom and deep pool of money being formed came the agents, the experts, and the critics. The artists that became known and famous to the point of saturation were seen as bohemian creatives, happy to live in relative poverty because it was all about their art. I cry foul on this completely. The cost of canvas, and particularly oil paints, were never cheap, out of the grasp of most. Certainly, colour pigments in the past had been used in paintings specifically to boast the wealth of the owner. So imagine the scene. Paris, mid-1860s. The streets are peppered with artists, dreamers with time on their hands and the ability to buy oil paints. not just the ones we know about, of course. They're only the few who made it. For every one Cézanne, there might be 20 Jean-Claude Forgottens. And here's where I have a problem with the section of art historians. Take Van Gogh. Penniless, mental health issues, fiercely driven. How did he live? Well, as is well documented, supposedly he only sold one painting in his lifetime. So how did he afford his materials? Oh, and his food, his lodgings, his travel. We have the lazy narrative of, well, he would trade a piece with a kindly cafe owner in exchange for a glass of wine and some bread and some cheese. Well, realistically, let's think that through. Imagine the scene. Vincent walks into his local cafe and says to Jean-Yves, "Hey, Jean-Yves, how you doing?" And Jean-Yves says, "Vincent, not today, buddy. Not today." And he goes, No. You haven't heard what I've got to say yet." And Jean-Yves says, "Well, I know why you're here, Vincent. You're in for something to eat and you want to give me one of your paintings. So, I'm just not interested." "Ah, Jean-Yves, you haven't seen what I've got to offer you yet." "Okay, Vinny, what is it?" "It's flowers. Let me stop you right there, Jean-Yves says, and points to the wall behind him and says, behind me, what we have is seascapes. Over to the left, we've got landscapes. Over to the right are the pretty young girls walking through fields of poppies. But the wall behind you, the biggest wall, it's the one reserved for flowers. I'm all up to my eyes with paintings and drawings by you guys coming here wanting free food. You know, it's not going to work. And Vinny says, but you haven't seen this one. There's sunflowers. Nope, not even for sunflowers. Come back when you can show me the colour of your sun teams, Vinny. And that's realistically the way it would happen. If you imagine that all of the artists around, and not just the ones that we know about, were walking around trying to trade for food for art, there wouldn't be a cafe still in business. So, of course, the real truth is that Vincent's brother, Theo, bankrolled him. Vincent chose to live as he did because he had the rare luxury of choice. This rather tarnishes the romantic image and perception of an artist, of course. So although it's there for all to see, it's sort of glossed over. He painted peasants and potato pickers. He lived like them because he was in touch with them, and one of them, just not so. Not to me, anyway. When Queen Victoria, encouraged by her husband, opened the V&A in London in the middle of the century, it was supposedly done to enlighten and educate the ordinary people and improve society. Condescending just doesn't quite cover it in my mind. You know, like the museum, the British Museum, as a cathedral of plunder, it certainly brought art to the masses, which of course is a good thing. But the myths they're fed, that's a con, in my opinion. Jumping forward some 100 years, we have critics rather than historians categorizing and evaluating Andy Warhol. Everything has been said that can be said about him, of course, and thankfully we have miles of footage to view. The one ambiguity is, though, it's the things he said, not the work that he necessarily produced. The famous for 15 minutes, the all art is theft, the art is money, money is art, the art is what you can get away with, etc., etc., etc. These statements have been endlessly discussed because Warhol himself rarely answered in full a direct question when being interviewed. Clever that. He knew exactly what he was doing, feeding the art critic mill. To me, these statements were sound bites. He started in advertising and illustration, after all, and he dressed windows. He was a salesman, and he knew the market and the audience inside and out. He was a master at it. These statements were advertising slogans. Put a tiger in your tank, snap, crackle, and pop, the real thing, and the rest. Taglines and straplines to provoke and catch your attention. Art theorists would have you believe that his famous for 15 minutes was his prophecy of Instagrammers and TikTokers. I don't agree with that at all. The divergence of fame and celebrity in the last 40 years is my reason for that belief, of course, but that's a discussion for another time. So anyway, there we have it. The last thing I would want is someone in the art world looking at my past from, after my untimely passing and saying, born in Belfast, he worked in fashion and progressed to the fine art world because of this or that or the other. This series of programs aims to lay my life and work bare, to be quite frank, and you'll get to know my work and who I am from the closest person to all of it. That would be me. So thanks for this brief time that I had with you today. I really appreciate it. Till next time.
Damien asks, what's behind the red curtains? It's a top secret thing, Damien.